The nurse's face was careful when she handed my mother the clipboard. Not unfriendly. Careful. The way people get when they know something you don't, and they're deciding how much rope to give you. My mother took it the way she takes everything with both hands, like it already belonged to her. Then her eyes moved down the page, and something happened to her expression that I had never seen before in 31 years of watching her face. It collapsed. Not dramatically, not all at once. The way a building comes down in a controlled demolition, floor by floor, from the inside out. She whispered a name I hadn't heard since I was 9 years old. I wasn't there for that moment. I was 3 floors up in a post-surgical room, learning how to breathe again without the left side of my chest screaming. But the nurse who was there told me everything later. Because nurses see things. And sometimes they tell you because you deserve to know. My name is Maya. I'm a 3rd-grade teacher at Cloverfield Elementary in Portland, Oregon. Which means I spend my days convincing 8-year-olds that math matters and that kindness is not weakness. I am good at both of those things. What I was not good at, for a very long time, was applying either lesson to my own life. My sister Jess is 4 years younger and twice as bright in every room she enters. Not bright like smart. Bright like a lamp turned up too high. She wants to be an actress. She has wanted to be an actress since she was 6 and performed a one-woman show at Thanksgiving using my grandfather's reading glasses as a prop. My mother has believed in her every single day since. That belief costs money. It has always cost money. Headshots and acting coaches, and the right workshops and the right showcases, and the apartment in Los Angeles that my mother described as an investment in Jess's future, as if the future were a savings account, and I was the one making deposits. I was. For 4 years, I covered things that my mother asked me to cover just this once. My stepdad's truck payment, the deposit on Jess's first LA apartment, the acting coach who charged $400 a session because he'd worked with someone who'd been in a movie you'd recognize, the showcase dress that cost $800 because the right people would be in the audience. I paid for it the way I paid for everything quietly, from a checking account that never seemed to grow, while telling myself this was what family did. My mother had a gift for making generosity feel like obligation. "You're the stable one," she would say, squeezing my arm the way you squeeze something you plan to use again. "Jess needs us right now. You understand." I understood. I understood through a classroom roof leak I didn't report because my principal would ask why I hadn't bought a better umbrella for my car, and the truth was, the umbrella money had gone somewhere else. I understood through the weekend job I picked up tutoring on Saturdays, not for savings, but to cover the gap. I understood through the headaches that started in October of last year and became migraines by February and became something the cardiologist called a structural abnormality by March, meaning the kind of thing that had been quietly building for years while I was too busy holding other things together to notice my own foundation cracking. I was told to schedule a procedure. Routine, the cardiologist said, but necessary. I scheduled it for May, after Jess's spring showcase, because my mother had already bought her plane tickets, and the timing would be hard for the family. The cardiologist looked at me the way doctors look at you when they disagree but won't say so directly. "We'll keep an eye on it," he said. The eye was not fast enough. It happened on a Thursday in April, during the reading block. I was walking between the rows of desks, listening to a boy named Cooper read about penguins, and the room tilted. Not like dizziness. Like the floor had decided to be a wall. I grabbed the edge of a desk, and Cooper stopped reading and looked up at me with those enormous 2nd-grade eyes and said, "Miss Maya, you look really gray." And then I was on the floor, and Cooper was shouting for Mrs. Chen next door, and the last clear thing I remember is the texture of the carpet against my cheek and thinking that someone needed to vacuum more thoroughly near the reading corner. When I woke up, the ceiling was the particular shade of white that exists only in hospitals, the kind that makes everything below it look temporary. There was a machine beside me, keeping track of my heartbeat with more interest than anyone in my family had shown in years. My mouth tasted like something had gone wrong inside it. My chest felt like a closed fist. A nurse appeared. Her name badge said Patricia. She had short gray hair and the demeanor of someone who had seen every possible version of a person waking up frightened and had learned to be the still point in the center of it. She told me I was at Providence. She told me there had been an emergency procedure. She told me it had gone well, that the team was excellent, that I was going to be fine with rest and monitoring. She said all of this in a voice engineered for steadiness, and I held on to it. Then I looked at the chair beside the bed. Empty. A water pitcher on the tray table. A folded blanket on the chair that no one had touched. The kind of room that tells you, without saying anything, that you arrived here alone and stayed that way. My family, I said. My voice was not my voice. It was something smaller and rougher that had come up from a damaged place. Patricia's expression did the thing that people's expressions do when they're trying to decide which version of the truth is kind. Your mother called, she said. She asked about your status. And? Patricia adjusted something on the monitor that didn't need adjusting. They had an event in Los Angeles, she said. Your sister's showcase. I repeated the word showcase in my head until it became sound and then noise and then nothing. How long was I out? 12 hours in surgery and recovery, she said. You've been in this room for about 6 hours. 18 hours, I said. Patricia looked at me. She said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. Did they ask when they could come? Your mother asked about discharge requirements, Patricia said carefully. Your stepfather asked whether you would be able to fly once released. Fly. To Los Angeles. To see the showcase that could not be rescheduled, because the right people were going to be in the audience. And Jess? Patricia's pause was half a second longer than the others. She said she'd light a candle for you. I stared at the ceiling for a long time after that. Not crying. Something colder than crying. The kind of feeling you get when you realize that what you thought was love was actually something with a different name, and you've been using the wrong word for so long that the correction is almost funny. My phone came back to me the next evening. 14 messages. My mother, call me when you're able. And then, 3 hours later, the doctors are saying you'll be fine, so we're staying through the weekend. Jess really needs this. My stepfather. Let us know if you need anything. Which was generous of him, since he was in another state and the offer cost exactly nothing. Jess had sent a photo. Not of herself, but of the theater where the showcase was held. The marquee was lit up. It looked expensive. She wrote, "This is it. Wish me luck." I put the phone face down and watched the window go dark. The next morning, a different nurse came in for the shift change. Her name was Renata, younger than Patricia, with the kind of efficient warmth that you develop when you've done hard work long enough to stop performing it. She checked my chart, adjusted my IV, and then looked toward the glass panel beside my door. "You've had a visitor," she said. I thought she meant a hospital volunteer or perhaps a colleague from school. Someone official. Someone with a clipboard. "He was here last night," she said. "And the night before, when you were still in recovery." I looked at the glass. The corridor was empty now. Early light coming gray through the far window. "He didn't come in?" Renata shook her head. "He asked at the desk about your room. He stood outside the glass for about an hour. Then he sat in the chairs at the end of the hall and stayed until visiting hours ended." I ran through the inventory of people who might appear at a hospital for someone like me. Colleagues, maybe. My department chair had sent a text. A few friends, the kind that exist in your phone more than in your daily life, had said they were sorry and asked if I needed anything. None of them had mentioned coming. Did he leave a name? Renata's face did something small. "It's in the log," she said. "That night, I couldn't sleep." Which is normal in hospitals because hospitals are not designed for sleeping, they are designed for surviving, and those are different activities. Around 11, I heard the soft squeak of someone moving carefully in the hallway, the deliberate quiet of a person trying not to disturb. I turned my head toward the glass panel. He was tall. That was the first thing. And still in a way that had nothing to do with waiting and everything to do with intention. He stood at the glass and looked in. And even in the corridor's low light, I could see that whatever he was feeling was not casual. It was not the look of someone who had stopped by out of politeness. It was the look of someone who had been worrying about something for a very long time and was trying to confirm that it was still there. I raised my hand. Just barely. The gesture you make when you're too tired to speak but want someone to know you see them? He went very still. Then he pulled the chair from the corridor wall and sat down with his back to the glass, not blocking my view, not crowding the door. Just present. The way a lighthouse is present. Not asking anything of you, just making sure the dark is not complete. I watched him through the glass until I fell asleep. The next morning, I asked Renata straight. The man who comes at night. What's his name? She studied me for a moment, the way people do when they're measuring the weight of information against the weight of the person asking for it. Then she said, his name is Owen Hartley. The name landed in my chest somewhere near the surgical site. Owen Hartley had been my father's best friend. My real father. Not my stepfather. My father, who died when I was 9 in a car accident on the I-84 on his way home from a work trip, in November, in the rain. Owen Hartley had stood at the back of the funeral and cried in a way that men of his generation clearly hadn't been taught to manage in public. I remembered him because I was 9 and grief-strange and watching everyone in the room like they were exhibits in a museum I hadn't chosen to visit. I remembered his face. I hadn't seen it since. My mother had not kept in touch with my father's people. She explained this in the years after by saying it was too painful, that moving forward required some distance, that my father's friends didn't understand the new chapter. She said this the same way she said everything that was actually about her in terms of what was necessary, what was required, what had to happen for the sake of the family's health. Why is he here? I asked. Not to Renata, really. To the room, Renata said. He spoke to billing. Quietly. Your account shows a hold. I looked at her. Paid, she said. Marked pending receipt of itemized statement, but covered. He paid my hospital bill. My family was in Los Angeles watching my sister audition, and a man I hadn't seen since my father's funeral had driven here and stood outside my room for 3 nights and paid my medical bill. When you have spent years purchasing things for people who never checked the price, you recognize real care immediately, because real care doesn't come with a receipt. It just appears. Without announcement, without making you feel that you owe anything for it. On the afternoon of the 4th day, when I could sit up without the room tilting and eat something that technically qualified as food, he knocked. He stood in the doorway with the posture of someone who had decided to be honest and was bracing for whatever that cost. He was older than the version of him I carried in memory. Of course he was. His hair had gone mostly silver. His face had the particular quality of someone who had weathered something long-term and come out the other side, quieter, but not diminished. Owen? I said. His face changed. Just slightly. The way faces change when they've been holding something neutral for a long time, and something finally gives them permission to let go. Maya, he said. He took the chair without being invited, but not presumptuously. He took it the way you take a seat when you've been standing in the hallway for 4 nights and your legs have earned it. How did you know I was here? He looked at his hands. Cooper's mother, he said. She teaches the 4th grade class next to yours. She posted on the school's parent group that Miss Maya had been taken by ambulance and that the class was with a substitute. I saw it. You're in the school's parent group. He looked up. I've kept track of you, he said. From a distance. I know it might seem strange. But I made a promise to your father. I've tried to honor it in whatever way seemed appropriate. My throat felt tight. What kind of promise? The kind that a man makes when he knows the plane is going down, Owen said quietly. Not literally. But your father knew, Maya. The last few months before he died, he talked about it sometimes. What would happen to you? Who would look after you? He wasn't worried about your mother. He knew she would be fine. He was worried about you specifically. He said you were the one who would disappear into the background while everyone else got loud. I stared at him. He was right, wasn't he? Owen said. I didn't answer. Because the answer was somewhere between the $90,000 worth of other people's emergencies that had passed through my bank account and a folded blanket on an empty chair. He nodded once, like he already knew. My mother arrived on the morning of the 6th day. I heard her before I saw her. The specific frequency of her voice when she is both concerned and inconvenienced, hitting a pitch that communicates both emotions with total sincerity. The staff could hear it. Renata appeared in my doorway with an expression that said the situation was being managed. A few minutes later, my mother walked in. She looked good. She always looks good. That is one of the genuinely impressive things about her, her ability to look unrumpled in situations that should ruffle her. Her hair was fresh. She had gotten it done while she was there, because LA has great salons and she had a few hours between the showcase and the flight. She crossed the room and touched my face in that way she has. The gesture that looks like tenderness, but lands like inspection. There you are, she said. Here I am, I said. You look better than I expected. She looked around the room, assessing it the way she assesses real estate. Are they treating you well? We should probably talk about moving you to a better facility once you're stable enough. I'm at Providence, I said. It's a good hospital. I know, but still. She sat in the chair beside my bed, the one that had been empty for 6 days. You gave us such a scare, Maya. I had open heart surgery, I said. Technically, she said, and then stopped herself from finishing the sentence because even she recognized that whatever came after, technically, was not going to land well. I watched her. Did you know, I asked, that Owen Hartley has been here every night? Something moved through my mother's face that she did not intend me to see. She caught it and covered it with professional speed. He has no business being here, she said. He's Dad's best friend. He was, she said. 30 years ago. He's not family. He paid my hospital bill. The cover slipped a little further. He did what? He covered my bill. Anonymous on paper? But it's him. So, I said, while you were in LA, a man I haven't spoken to since I was 9 years old drove here, stood outside my room every night, and paid my hospital costs. And you're telling me he has no business being here? My mother stood up and moved to the window, the way people move when they need to rearrange their position to buy time for their thoughts. That man has an agenda, she said. He's trying to insinuate himself. Into what? Into our family. Into your life. He tried to do this after your father died too, she said, her voice gaining the particular solidity she uses when she's decided on a version of events. He wanted to be involved. I put a stop to it. I kept my voice even. Why? Because it wasn't appropriate. Because we had moved on. Because, what did Dad's will say? The window held her for a moment longer than it should have. She turned back. What? I had learned in 31 years that the questions my mother deflects are the questions worth asking twice. What did Dad's will say? I repeated. She sat back down. She crossed her legs and smoothed her pants. Your father's estate was complicated, she said. There were provisions that were, look. The point is, Owen Hartley has never had our best interests at heart. He had mine, I said. For 6 nights when you didn't. Her jaw tightened. I was there for your sister. That was important. I was in surgery. You were stable. There it was. That word again, used the same way it had always been used as a closing argument, as a way of marking me paid in full and moving on to the next item on the list. You were stable. You were fine. You were the one who could handle it. You always handle it. I let the silence sit. Then I said, I have some things to tell you. She waited with the look she uses when she thinks she's about to hear something manageable. I'm not covering anything else, I said. Not Jess's coaching. Not the apartment. Not the workshop next fall that you already mentioned in your last 3 texts before I went into surgery. Maya, the automatic transfer stopped while I was in the hospital. I asked Renata to bring me my phone, and I did it from the bed on day 2, I said. I had time to think. You can't just... Mom. I looked at her. I paid for 4 years of someone else's dream. I skipped my own doctor's appointments because I was covering other bills. I am in this hospital because I did not take care of myself because I was too busy taking care of everyone else. I'm 31 years old, and I had open heart surgery, and the chair next to my bed was empty for 6 days. I am not doing this anymore. Her voice took on the texture it gets when the reasonable approach isn't working and she needs another register. I am your mother. I did not raise you to be selfish. I am not selfish, I said. I have been so far from selfish that I nearly died proving it. There's a difference. She stood again. She moved around the room, picking up and putting down the small objects that you accumulate in a hospital room. The extra blanket, the water cup, the book Renata had brought me from the cart as if handling things would help her handle the conversation. When she got to the doorway, she stopped. Owen Hartley cannot give you what a family gives you, she said. Tell me, I said, what my family gave me. Name one thing, in the last 4 years, that came from you to me. Not a request, not a need, not a situation where I was asked to be stable. One thing that came to me. She stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then she left. My stepfather came up 20 minutes later. He is a man who has never started a conversation that my mother didn't hand him first. He stood inside the door with the posture of a person delivering a message he didn't write. He said that I needed to think about the implications of cutting off family. He said that Jess was at a critical point in her career. He said that I would regret it when things got hard, and I had no one to call. I said, gently, that I had been the one called for 4 years, and I did not recall anyone extending the same offer in return. He left. Owen came that evening. He sat in the chair that my mother had occupied for a total of 40 minutes. He brought a paper bag with a turkey sandwich and a bag of pretzels because Renata had told him the hospital food wasn't working for me, and he asked if it was all right if he stayed for a while. I told him about the conversation with my mother. He listened the way people listen, when they already know the ending but understand that you need to say the whole thing out loud before it belongs to you. When I finished, he said, "She told you, eventually, what the will said?" "No," I said. He folded his hands in his lap. "Your father's estate included a fund," he said. "Not enormous, but meaningful. It was held in trust for you specifically, not for the family, for you. It was supposed to be released to you at 25. I was very still. Your mother had it restructured," Owen said. "Legally, the way those things can be done when a surviving spouse has the right representation. She was the executor. There were avenues." I stared at him. "I found out about 2 years after the fact," he said. "I tried to contact you then, but your mother made clear through her attorney that contact wasn't welcome. I respected that. Incorrectly." He looked at his hands again. "Your father asked me to look out for you, and I let a letter from a lawyer stop me. I'm sorry for that. I didn't know what to do with that apology, so I did what you do with things that are too large to process immediately. I held it carefully and set it somewhere in my chest and decided to look at it more closely when I had the structural capacity." "What was the fund?" I asked. He told me. I thought about the Saturday tutoring sessions, and the credit card with the low limit, and the doctor's appointment I had rescheduled 4 times. I thought about it for a while. Then I said, "That was my money." "Yes," he said. "She used it." "What can be proven gets complicated," Owen said, which is attorney speak for yes. I looked out the window. Portland was doing what Portland does in April, which is rain without committing to it. The kind of weather that can't decide between ending and continuing. "What do I do with this?" I said. Owen was quiet for a moment. "The not lawyer version," he said, "is that you heal, and then you talk to an estate attorney, and then you decide how much of the past you want to spend energy on and how much of the future you want to build instead. That's very measured. I've had 22 years to think about what advice your father would want me to give you," he said. He was not a dramatic man, he was a practical one. He would say the same thing. I looked at Owen Hartley, who had stood outside a glass panel for 6 nights, saying nothing and asking for nothing, who had paid a bill he had no obligation to pay, who had been honoring a promise to a dead man for over 2 decades in the only way available to him. "He was a 3rd-grade teacher, too," I said. "My dad?" Owen smiled. "1st through 3rd grade. Actually. Same district as yours. Until he moved. He thought it was the most important job there was." "I know," I said. "He told me that." Owen nodded. "He told me you told your mother that when you were 10 and she asked you to consider something more practical. He was so proud of you for that. I hadn't known anyone had witnessed that moment. I had said it defiantly to my mother in a kitchen that smelled like coffee and been sent to my room. I had not known my father had heard it from somewhere. I had not known he had told anyone. I pressed my fingers to my eyes. Not crying. Something adjacent to crying that happens when a thing you lost turns out to have left evidence. 3 weeks after discharge on my own timeline, after I had recovered to the point where a walk to the end of the block didn't wind me, I stood at the window of my apartment, watching the street below. My mother had left 2 voicemails I hadn't returned. My stepfather had sent a text that was mostly about Jess's callback and ended with, "Hope you're feeling better." Jess had sent a reel of herself performing a scene. No question mark. No "how are you," just the scene. Lit well. Submitted as evidence that the investment had not been wasted. I watched all the way to the end. She was talented. She had always been talented. That was never the question. I typed back, "You're good, Jess. I hope you get it." And then I closed the app and sat with the specific stillness of a person who has finally run out of road in one direction and is standing very still before choosing another. Owen had given me the name of an estate attorney. He had also given me his phone number, written on the back of a gas station receipt, which I found oddly comforting. The kind of number you put in your phone not because you need it immediately, but because having it changes the weight of the room. I called him the following Sunday. We talked for an hour about nothing consequential. He told me about the dog he had adopted from a shelter in Beaverton. I told him about Cooper, the boy who had noticed I was gray before anyone else, who had brought me a drawing of a penguin when he learned I was back. Owen laughed at the penguin story in a way that reminded me of something I hadn't heard in so long that it took me a minute to identify it. He laughed like my father. I don't know exactly what the next part looks like. I know what it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like Saturday tutoring sessions and credit cards and a checking account that drains quietly into other people's certainties. It doesn't look like stable as a synonym for fine on your own. It doesn't look like an empty chair. But I have learned this from the particular education of lying in a hospital room and watching who shows up. The people who love you don't wait for an emergency to prove it. They are not looking for a reason to help you. They are not waiting to be asked. They are already there, in the hallway, at the glass, staying until the end of visiting hours. Because the alternative, the idea that you might believe no one came, is something they cannot accept. My mother always said that family is the people you can depend on. She was right. She just never understood that depend works in both directions, and that what she built over 31 years was not dependence but debt, and the two things look the same until the moment you're alone in a hospital room and the difference becomes impossible to miss. I put Owen's number in my phone under a name I chose carefully. I put it under Dad's friend. Then I looked out at Portland doing its complicated thing with the rain, and I let myself imagine, just briefly, what it might feel like to build something that doesn't have a leak in it, something where my name is not synonymous with available, something where the people who love me do not need a crisis to remember that I exist. I think it might feel like that first real breath after surgery, the one where you realize the machinery is working and the room has stopped tilting and you are, for the first time in longer than you can quite account for, simply and entirely here, alive, not stable, here.